Good morning, friends, and welcome to Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. One of the major challenges faced by the road transport industry in India is shortage of skilled and trained drivers. But is this shortage of drivers only confined to India? Well, according to statistics, this is a global phenomenon, and almost every country across the globe is facing this crisis. And needless to say, if the situation is not corrected soon, the entire logistics system will get impacted, because even today and probably for the next 20 years, road transport will continue to be the dominant mover of cargo and passengers. While we are aware of the situation in India and the kind of treatment that is meted out to the truck drivers, but what is the scenario in Europe? To know more about the situation in Europe and other countries, we spoke to the International Road Union, headquartered in Geneva and representing all major transport associations and companies in Europe. We are privileged to have with us Ms. Marie-Anne Cervoni, Senior Manager, Strategy and Market Intelligence, IRU, and Ms. Natalia Corchado, Market Intelligence Analyst, IRU, to talk on the subject in this very special episode of Trans India presented by Apollo Tyres. Friends, surprisingly, the situation in Europe is not very different from India, except for the fact that IRU is putting in a lot of efforts backed by data to get countries to frame policies that would make the profession attractive for youngsters, especially women. Let us know more about the role of IRU, the situation in Europe and other countries, and can Indian drivers make it to Europe for taking up the profession that is losing its sheen? Coming up after this very short break, our interaction with Marie-Anne Cervoni and Natalia Corchado. You are watching Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. Welcome back to Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. We are in conversation today with Marie-Anne Cervoni and Natalia Corchado from the International Road Union. So Mary, to start with, what are the major activities of IRU and what is its geographical reach?
Yeah, sure. So IRU is the World Road Transport Organization. So we are representing, in fact, the interest of the industry worldwide in over 100 countries. We are representing national associations, but also large transport operators, shippers, service providers. We are used to say that we are the voice of 3.5 million of companies, globally speaking. In terms of the main activities or areas, for sure we advocate for the industry. So this is the first thing. So this is about advocacy, and notably in Europe with our Brussels office. But we also facilitate train and transit with TR tool that we are developing under the UN Convention, which is facilitating the transport of goods worldwide. And then maybe the last activity that I would like to mention here is our activity around certification and standards. Because IRU certifies thousands of drivers every year. And we are very pushing this activity to ensure better safety on the road, efficiency and sustainability.
Mary, how significant is road transport in Europe as compared to other modes of transport?
In fact, in Europe, and we could say that in other regions, of course, but in Europe, road transport is the backbone of the economy, clearly. If I can take two numbers that are, I think, very significant, 75% of the goods are transported by road in Europe. And if you take specifically perishable products, health products, notably as examples, it is 80% which is transported by road.
Mary, shortage of drivers is becoming a global issue. How bad is the situation in Europe?
Yeah, so indeed, it is, as you say, it is a global problem. We communicate this number, which is very high, which is the 2.6 million of truck drivers and field positions globally. If you take Europe specifically, it is about 425,000 truck drivers positions and field. And we estimate as a forecast, if you take, for example, a forecast of 5 years, that the shortage could increase even a lot more because of the wave of retirements which is expected in the coming 5 years, knowing that 35% of the truck drivers are above 55 years old. So the situation is expected to be worse if nothing is done today to be praised and to have enough capacity to attract young or women to join the profession.
But has the situation worsened after COVID, or the situation was equally alarming before that as well?
Yeah, so in fact, if you take 2019, so before COVID, shortage was high in Europe. It was 24%. Then it decreased a lot during COVID by 70%, of course, due to the lack of demand of transportation. And then we can see with the recovery of the demand in 2021 and until, of course, the last year, 2022, the driver shortage is becoming or recovering again in terms of amounts, with a 40% increase between 2020 and 2021 already.
So Mary, what would be the reasons for drivers shortage in Europe? Is it because demand has outpaced the supply, or is it that people just don't want to take up this profession?
Yeah, in fact, it is the combination of the two. The first reason, of course, is the profession fails to attract new people to the profession, and notably the young and the women. As a reference, in Europe, only 7% of the truck drivers are below 25 years old. So this is a very low number. So of course, the first reason is the failure to attract young people, and the fact, as I said a little bit earlier, is that the current driver population is old, with 34% of drivers above 55. So this is the first reason, and why we are failing to attract young is because indeed the age to access the profession is still 21 years old in many countries in Europe, and when we will speak about the solution maybe later, we can a little bit be more specific on this one. And the fact that, and this one is a very good also a reason, the cost to access the profession. It is very expensive to become a truck driver today in Europe, and you have some differences between the countries. But globally speaking, it is very expensive to get the license and the training. So this is, of course, preventing the access to the profession. And of course, the demand that is expected to continue to grow, when we can see the forecast even for this year, when we see a 20% increase of transport demand in Europe, of course, this is increasing even more the emergency to find a solution.
So how does one actually become a driver in Europe, and what is the kind of training and cost involved? We'll continue our interaction with Mary and Natalia after this very short break. You are watching Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. Welcome back to Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special. Mary, what is the process to become a truck driver and what is the cost involved? Can you give a little indication on that? And how long does it take to procure a driving license? What's the average time duration, including training?
So to become a truck driver, you need to have a CPC driver license. So it is a specific license to be able to drive a truck, or it is also the case for the bus and coach. This is in terms of average price. If I take the example of, for example, of France, it is around 2,500, I think, euro and more to have access to or to pay the license alone. You see, so but it is in euro. In US dollars, it is quite equivalent, a little bit less. But in even some other countries, like in Poland, it is even 4,000 euros. You see, so it is quite very expensive for young. In terms of duration, it is. I'm just looking at Natalia, but you have an idea of the duration? 240 hours, so meaning that it is about at least 1 year of training to get the license around. So it is quite a lot.
So Mary, besides just the cost of training, what are the other barriers that stop people from taking up this profession?
So in fact, even if the truck driver gross salary are relatively high, because we always hear, and it is fair, that the truck driver salaries are not enough high to attract. And in fact, when we have a look on the data and the figures, we can see that in all the European countries, the truck driver salaries are a lot higher than the minimum gross salary in a specific country. And even over 3 times higher in some countries. So what we say is that the salary is not the only challenge, or is not the main challenge. It is really about the driver working conditions. This is where the challenge remains the biggest. And notably, and I think that it is also linked with the difficulty to attract women, is the lack of safe and secure truck parking areas. I think that this is one of the main issues, and so that they can rest, eat, take a shower, while the trucks and the load are safe. So this is the first point. The second one, which is also something that is very clear when we speak with drivers and we get the feedback from the ground, is the poor treatment of the drivers at the loading and unloading sites. And the fact that so there is long waiting times, loading and unloading often are performed by the driver themselves. So it is, an additional, indeed, difficulty in terms of day-to-day operations. And then the long periods away from home. Because even if you take national transportation, the average distance is quite high per month. So this is, of course, preventing the attractiveness to the profession.
Mary, apart from Europe, you have also conducted studies in places like Central Asia, China, Middle East, and also America. How grim is the situation in these countries?
So in US, it is a very known challenge. A lot of you can find a lot on this situation and these issues. It is about 80,000 truck drivers missing in US. If you take the example of Mexico, this is about 45,000 truck drivers missing. In Eurasia, 160,000. But if you take China, it is about 1.5 million truck drivers positions missing. So there is, of course, in all these different countries, a high proportion of old drivers, a little bit like what we find in Europe, like it is notably the case in US or in Turkey. But it is not the case in other countries such as Mexico, where we can find and we see definitely in the different actions that are implemented by the association and the government, is the capacity to encourage young drivers to access the profession. And if you take the example of Mexico, 18% of the truck drivers are below 25. So in terms of best practices, it is interesting to see how they are trying to improve the image of the profession thanks to the media, but also to support the profession with incentives given to the transport operators to hire young people.
Well, friends, we can clearly see that the problems of drivers are quite similar to that in India. At the same time, Europe is actively working towards getting more youngsters and women in the profession. So what are the solutions and what is IRU doing to address these issues? We'll continue our interaction with Mary and Natalia on the other side of this very short break. You are watching Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. Welcome back to Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. We are in conversation with Mary Ann Cervoni and Natalia Corchado, representing the International Road Union. So Mary, while we have spoken about the problems, let's shift our focus to solutions. What do you think needs to be done to bridge this demand-supply gap?
So, in fact, as I mentioned, the need to attract the young and women is, of course, a key lever. And all the industry, globally speaking, and we are a lot advocating for that, is working on that. Is trying to attract young and women with specific actions and initiatives. In some countries, however, we also need to retain drivers, because it is not only hire, but also retain. So this is notably the case in Mexico or US or Uzbekistan. This is something which is quite very important here to be mentioned, retaining and also hiring. And also additionally, companies complain that they especially struggle to find skilled drivers in some countries. And it is notably the case in Uzbekistan or maybe in China. So, in fact, in our study, operators agree that in order to attract more drivers, measures to improve driver working conditions should be prioritized on the first stage to be able indeed to, as I said, to attract notably the young and women.
Many women drivers, due to various reasons, do not fancy this profession. In fact, the number of women drivers in India is absolutely negligible. What would be the number of female drivers in Europe, and what steps is IRU taking to attract more women to this profession?
So in fact, when you take the figure, it is quite a very strong number. 3% only of truck drivers are women in Europe today. So of course, the main areas to indeed attract women to the profession is improving working conditions, and notably, and it's notably what IRU is a lot pushing for, is to have sufficient safe parking infrastructure with adequate facilities, and notably restrooms for women. And just to give you a little bit example of the situation in Europe today in terms of parking, there is a lack of 100,000 parking spaces in the EU. So it is a lot. And out of 300,000 existing, only 3% are in areas which are certified and safe. So a lot needs to be done to improve this part. Then, recently, the EU and the European Commission has adopted new rules setting out the level of service and security of safe and secure parking areas. And IRU is really part of this exercise with the European Commission to fill the gap of this capacity of parking. Then the other action, which is important to attract women, is to indeed improve the treatment of the drivers at the delivery sites. And notably the access to toilets for men, but also for women, and to also to give them the feeling that they are secured in the site. On this point specifically, IRU has signed a charter with the European Shippers Council to improve the treatment of the drivers at delivery sites. So this is something that we are really pushing a lot for since now, I could say 2 years. And this charter is really the kind of official way to push the industry to indeed develop adequate capacities for women. The last point maybe is the long period away from home. It is an issue for women, notably, but this does not explain why we don't have more female drivers doing national transport. Because as I was telling you, in many countries in Europe, the transport is national, and on short distance or medium distance, you don't find more women. So maybe it is really about more, promoting the profession, globally speaking.
And how responsive is the government to such demands?
Yeah, so the governments are more and more responsive for that. What we are doing, notably on this topic, is that IRU, in fact, is working on a roadmap with the different national associations. The national associations are then working closely with the different national governments to implement what the roadmap is recommending. And we can see definitely in the different, notably, I take the example of France, we can see more and more actions from the government to indeed to support, globally speaking, the industry, and notably to facilitate trainings and programs for women to access to the profession. So clearly, there is a very good positive signal from the government to also implement what we can recommend at our level.
Mary, we have seen trucks undergo a lot of changes in technology as well as design. What changes do you think have made driving as well as life easier for the drivers?
It is a very good question. In fact, this is what we want to use to promote the profession today. As members, and I am also watching, looking at Natalia because she was discussing, it was last year with Scania, I think, or maybe MAN. They are members of IRU, and they are very interested to understand the driver shortage and how the technology and the innovation can really represent a way, in fact, to attract young. And this is clearly, if I can take some examples, notably the high resolution screens to replace the traditional instrument panel, which is a good example, but also the ergonomics and the comfort to improve to facilitate the driver needs while driving, but also resting. And also something which is very important and on which we want to reinforce the positive image of the profession is all the safety features that are now available in the different trucks. So, for example, the e-call or all the different GPS on-time services that you can find. And then also, of course, all the Internet of Things that are connecting the vehicle. And so clearly, just to finish on that, because it is something that the manufacturers are a lot looking for in terms of main drivers for the evolution of the product.
And how do you see the future from here on?
As I said, the forecast is, if you have a look on the next 5 years, the forecast, if we stay at at the current level in terms of new recruitments. As I said, the forecast is we estimate that 1 million truck drivers could miss in 2026 in Europe. So you can imagine that what could be the impact, and it is already the case, the impact on the logistics, and notably the impact on the supply chain disruption, the delivery delays, of course, but more importantly is the increase of the freight rates. Because of course, if there is a lack of drivers, so then it is having an impact on the cost and of course the capacity to deliver. So that's why all what I just said in terms of areas of actions from IRU is key to accelerate and to really give the possibility to the governments to take the correct decisions to be able to limit this number, which is quite a lot.
While we have seen quite a large number of truck drivers migrate to places like Canada or Middle East, however, Europe is still not on the radar for Indian drivers for many reasons, the language barrier being one of them. But what are the options for Indian drivers in Europe, and is IRU willing to help them? We'll know more about this from Mary and Natalia after this very short break. You are watching Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. Welcome back to Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. We are in conversation with Marianne Cervoni and Natalia Corchado representing the International Road Union. So Mary, we have been seeing that a lot of truck drivers from India migrate to places like say Canada, but Europe has been fairly unexplored. Is Europe open to taking drivers from India, and would IRU facilitate any such opportunity?
It is a very good question because it is one of our last actions we are currently communicating on and that we want to push. It is indeed to give the possibility for the third countries, so outside of Europe, to give the possibility of drivers from outside of Europe countries to access to the profession in Europe, so then they can indeed enter the market. This is notably the case of North Africa, but also the case of CIS countries, but it can be also the case of India. So this is typically what we are looking for now. The issue, and this is where the issue, and there is of course solution behind on which we are working on as IRU, is to work on the qualifications equivalence that we can promote to make this happen, because the qualification, of course, of a truck driver in India is not going to be okay for Europe. So then, as IRU, we need to find the correct qualification process to give the possibility to the drivers to get an equivalent to CPC license to be able to operate in Europe. So it is exactly what we are more and more pushing, because we believe that young people is not enough to, of course, to fill the gap because of the demographic situation that we all know. So it will be not enough. So we need to also develop this type of actions that you just mentioned.
There is also a language issue. So we also want to promote EU members to give the possibility for drivers who are requalifying or taking some additional courses to be able to drive in Europe, to take the exams and the tests and the trainings in another language which is not the national language, for example, English, to make it easier for the brain drivers to.
And finally, how stringent is the training process in Europe and the procedure to get a driving license?
Well, as Marianne mentioned, so you need to take your C driving license first to be able to drive a truck. But if you're if you're a professional driver, additionally you need to take this professional qualification training and exam. Not only that, when you have your license, there's a requirement also for all EU countries to take refresher trainings every 5 years to be able to continue working as a professional driver. And this means 35 hours additional training every 5 years. And just to mention as well that in some countries, there is an issue of drivers, a high proportion of drivers not passing the CPC exam, which means that it is not that easy to pass the exam. So in some countries, our members are saying they also have a problem on drivers who are not, there's a high proportion of drivers who don't pass the exam.
And just that, but just very briefly, to finish on this qualification from third countries, IRU is developing certification and standards, as I said at the beginning, activities. And what we want to do is indeed to promote our truck drivers evaluation tool that we call Roadmasters as being a way for foreign truck drivers to make a specific evaluation that could be equivalent to the CPC that Natalia just mentioned, so just as a solution.
So truck drivers in India, if you're looking to explore career opportunities in Europe, the above is some basic information that could be helpful to you. We are extremely thankful to Mary-Anne Cervoni and Natalia Corchado for their precious time and valuable inputs. We will be back again next week with another special interaction. Please do subscribe to our channel. You are watching Apollo Tyres presents Trans India, an IRU special episode. Until next week, stay safe. Jai Hind.